let's talk Trailstar. So we got up to Talon, and it was, I had checked the forecast, and the forecast on Blencathra, which is not a million miles away, was showing gusts up to, I think, about 47 miles per hour. When we got to the Talon, it wasn't really too bad, to be honest. It was blustery, but certainly acceptable. So I pitched the Trailstar, and I basically started to set up camp. The wind still was about the same. Maybe it was picking up a little bit, because again the forecast was showing, you know, that the wind was picking up late afternoon and getting stronger into the evening. But obviously we had that debacle and an instant blaming of the scarp, and then, you know, retracting it. Fair enough, good. You know, I've been doing this long enough. I should have known better, really. I knew there wasn't really anywhere else to camp lower down, and he did suggest, again to be fair, that we go down and drive somewhere else, and she sort of points me in the direction of somewhere else, and I said no, it'll be fine. And I thought it would be. I thought, well, we've only got a small breeze coming through, so we'll be fine.
Basically, it's not as sheltered as I was expecting.
Obviously the Trailstar is different to other shelters in that you've got a big open door. You have to try and point that door, you know, away from the wind. And it's just unfortunate that when I was pitching, and I think this is what happens in, particularly I think, a three-sided tarn, because I was in the Lake District, what, 2 years ago, and I was in the a Cuban Trailstar, but that tarn, it wasn't really three-sided. It was kind of high on one side, and then the other side kind of dropped down, and then behind me was fairly low, really. You know, you could walk over it. There was no climbing involved. And then the fourth side was basically the river or the water getting out of the tarn. So that particular tarn was a 1.5 sided tarn, rather than this one, which was really a 3.5 sided tarn, because you had high hills all around it, apart from where water was getting out of it, and apart from where water was coming into it. And that kind of exasperated the situation here. So when I was pitching, I was thinking, I was looking at where the wind and the rain was blowing, and 1 minute it was coming from where the water was coming from area, and the next minute when I was pitching, it was coming from where the water was going. It was literally from both directions when I was pitching. So I put the front of the Trailstar towards the grassy bank, basically to try and give it some protection, and that was really the only area where wind was not coming from. There's a few little tadpoles swimming around in there. Quite a few of them, loads of them over there. It's like every single thing that could happen and could go wrong happened and went wrong within the space of an hour or so, really. So one person all at the same time.
You're only supposed to blow the bloody doors off. I could have just moved that bloody door. I have, of course, since taken myself back to school, because sometimes we have to re-educate our stupid brains, and of course, if I'd have used my brain properly, you can, of course, pitch the Trailstar very low. Here it is, in London, at 80 centimetres high.
When you get a lot lower on the newer model, when there's just a breeze, you're still fine under there. And if you were pitched head to tail, as it were, I still think you would be fine. And if your head, you know, even if you're at the back, you know, I think you'll be fine. Just understand that you might very well just have it coming in on you, you know, quite a bit, and generally speaking, I still think that it will protect you. It's yeah. What happened was that the wind was catching the front. And at that point, I'd not lowered the door so much. And when it was catching the door, somehow, and it's never ever happened, somehow the front door guy line was coming loose. So everything would be tight, and then a massive blast of air. Because what you have to remember, it wasn't just strong wind, it was quite calm-ish, and then all of a sudden these really, really massive, nasty gusts, very, very strong gusts of wind would come through and would just smack into the side of the Trailstar. And again, I think if I'd have had it to the rear, it might have survived better with the very shallow angles of the back, or however you describe those angles at the back. But because it was smacking into the side, it was putting, you know, a lot of pressure on the side wall, particularly near the door where it was highest. And like I said, when I lowered the door, so I went out, tightened it back up again, and got back under cover again. And then, bugger me, about 20 minutes later, I'm not sure how long, it wasn't that long, another sudden gust caught the door. Like I say, you have to remember that it is not designed, even though we should be able to get a low door, and you know, it should withstand side gusts. It's not quite so easy to get a low door with the new model and not have the larger panels coming in on you, you know, when it's very, very windy. Like I said, I think you'd be okay. I'm not saying it's not doable. It's just, it's not ideal. I could put up with it because I'm kind of used to these things. So, the second time that we did the front pole, we got back in again, And as we were getting inside, another gust of winds came over, and that's the one that removed the line lock down here. It was over that side, but that was torn out. I got out and I still didn't give up, because you still have the loop there. The stitching was fine. It was literally just the plastic line lock that broke. Probably like a 1 in a 10,000 chance that a line lock is going to go. I don't know whether that happens very often. I doubt it. So that happened. So I got a piece of cord, obviously threaded it through, you know, just did a simple knot thing, and secured it down, and I got back under cover again. And then I heard something else, or I can't remember whether I didn't hear something else, and I was just out walking, repegging, and that's when I looked at the apex, and there was a big tear in the very top on this side of the apex. I was thinking it would still be waterproof, but of course the waterproof outer has split, so if it did rain, water would still get through that material up there. So we are taking a bit of a chance. I've checked the forecast. There's not supposed to be much, if any, rain tonight. You know, if it does rain, and if it gets in, well, we can we can cover that as well, because what we could do, although I'm not sure how I would secure it, but I've got my kilt, and I could put the kilt over the top on the outside, and that would act as a makeshift waterproof barrier for the apex. So we could potentially, you know, even do something with that. So this trip has turned into, I won't say a disaster, it's turned into something, you know, completely different. I noticed the tear and I thought, well, we'll keep going. We won't give up yet. Maybe the rain won't get through. I don't think too much rain was forecast for last night either, so that still didn't make me go. In the end, it was a combination of, obviously, you know, the tear there, obviously that had gone. I was still kind of okay with that, but I did have to make the center pole a little bit higher, which I think is a slight thing on this slightly larger Trailstar. And of course then you have to make the door a little bit higher, which then makes these walls a little bit higher. And again, because the wind was coming from the side, if it had been coming from the back, we might very well have been okay. It's just an unfortunate pitching position as much as anything else. I can't say whether it would have survived those howling, thrusting, penetrating thrusts of wind, because like I said, 1 minute it was calm, and then it was literally like Godzilla was just stamping on us. It was crazy weather, and it just got to that point where I was thinking, you know, this weather isn't going to get any better, and, you know, maybe we ought to, you know, there comes a time where, you know, bravado and common sense starts to kick in, and that's when I thought, well, the wind's only going to get worse. We've already got a reasonably mortally injured Trailstar, and like I said, the forecast for the wind was to get worse over the next 3 or 4 hours, bearing in mind at that time it was about 6 o'clock, and of course it was dark at 8, and I think the worst of the wind was like 9, 10, 11, and then it would ease off. It was going to ease off about 11 o'clock, which was the shame really. But I thought, given that the wind is only going to get worse, I did the only thing that was practical, and that was pack up and, you know, and head back. And literally, as I was videoing outside, just a, you know, a quick toodaloo as it were, that's when this line up here just it just tore it off, clean off. But we're back out today. That is the beauty of the Trailstar. I've just put a knotted a loop through there. All the other line locks are fine. Obviously the one down here that's been torn off I'm not using, so we're just ignoring that one. We could have pitched down there. But yeah, we could have pitched down there. I just thought, let's just have a look up this hill and just see. It's not a very good pitch, I will admit. It's far from good. And I don't think many tents or shelters are big enough and magnificent enough, even after they've been battered and bruised, to feature a water feature. I do think that if it had been in a normal windy exposed area with the wind from behind, even if it was pitched a little bit higher, because that's kind of how you have to pitch this slightly larger Trailstar. It's not so easy to get a low pitch and a low door that the wind doesn't blow everything in on you. So I think if it had been pitched a little bit higher but still fairly close to the ground, just with a higher door, I think the wind would have, for the most part, whistled past us. And realistically, you should not have your Trailstar pitched with the wind coming in at the side. Really, I probably should have. I think some of it was laziness again. And I was also thinking, well, if I open the door there and then the wind comes in this direction, I'm going to have to move the door again. You know, I put it down to I was just too lazy. I was just too tired, and I just couldn't be bothered. And I just left the door there, and the wind was coming in on a higher door, hitting the side, and I think that literally just did for us. And I said, I think if I had have opened up the door here, then this would have been the back, and we probably would have been okay. I can't 100% guarantee that the top wouldn't have split, but it probably wouldn't. I think it split because there was too much pressure on this high side panel, so it was probably a little bit of user error, you know, as much as anything else. I really don't think we can blame the Trailstar, and I'm obviously going to try and defend it anyway. I'm not one of these that's just instantly going to blame the equipment. I think, you know, I was in a tarn, it was clearly too windy. We've seen it happen before. You know, the lesson is, you know, avoid tarns when it's very, very windy, especially 3 or 3.5 sided tarns. I think if they're more open, you know, you might be okay. I can't say for sure, but you might be okay. Like I said, I had very, very strong wind in the Lake District in that other trip a couple of years ago in the Cuban Trailstar, and you know, I moved the door about 3 or 4 times in 3 days then.
One thing that's just been crossing my mind, and I'm sure others too, is how this shelter, which is 20D and is about 5 inches or 10 centimeters longer in the hem on each panel would have compared to the older original Trailstar, which was 30D and slightly shorter in the hem, but not very much in it. The height of both the Trailstars is the same. There is no difference in the height because that is the width of the material that Ron gets. I did check this. I think the first thing that needs to be, obviously taken away from this is, as we quite clearly pointed out, I should have moved the door. That was probably the single biggest, stupidest mistake that I made, was not moving the door. But as I said, I think because I was in the tarn and the wind was swirling to a degree, that's why I kind of stubbornly left the door where it was. But most of the wind was coming from the way that the wind was coming from in the end, not when I was pitching it. When I was pitching it, it was coming from all angles apart from where the door was. But at the end, it was primarily coming from the left and whipping across. So I should have moved the door, and I do slightly kick myself for not moving that door, because it would have been interesting to see how it coped. It clearly would have coped better than most shelters out there. The one thing that I did notice, and I was quite surprised about, was how much the panels were intruding inside. Now, I reduced the panel to 1 meter, and I found that the panels were coming in quite a bit. So I actually increased the height of the pole slightly to 107 centimeters. So still incredibly low, but I didn't seem to be able to get the door very much lower to get, straight, tight panels. Maybe I could have done, but I didn't seem to be able to. I don't think the 30D would have intruded into the interior as much as the 20D. The 20D did seem to have quite a bit of stretch to it. But that's also a good thing, don't forget, because then, that is flexing, and that's doing what it should be doing, and that's flexing and protecting you. The other thing I should have done is put something, even if it was just, I don't know, something. I'm sure I would have had something there that could have gone between the pole tip and the apex, because clearly there was a massive amount of downward pressure because my pole tip bent from the pressure, and I noticed that early on, and that was also another reason why I abandoned camp, because my pole was starting to to get a bend in it, and I was kind of like thinking, well, things are just starting to get a little bit hairy now, and as I said, I knew the weather was actually going to get worse. It was going to get even windier later on, so there was no way I was going to stay up there with the weather getting even worse and things, steadily falling apart around me. So yes, I do think the 20D probably did intrude into the interior more, but I don't think that would have mattered too much. I think it would have stood up fine. It clearly would have been a bit more uncomfortable than maybe the 30D model, but for people who have the 20D, clearly the chances of you being in those types of conditions, I think, is incredibly unlikely. And more importantly, if you are, put something between your pole tip and the apex of the shelter and clearly get it low, get it down to 1 meter, and if you have to put up with the fly sheet coming in on you, then you're just going to have to put up with it. And that's just, that's literally the price we pay for a lightweight, flexible, adaptable shelter. We just got to put up with it, and that's it. And that's what I was kind of saying, in the other video. It's just, you just got to put up with it, basically. I do generally think, though, if you move the door, protect the apex with something just to spread the pressure, get it low, I think probably you would be okay. But I also think that if you've got conditions like that, I really think probably that's the point where we need to be moving. You know, I think whatever shelter you're in, you're probably starting, because those winds, they were like hammering down, like Thor's hammer on top of the shelter. And I think if that carried on for hours and hours and hours, I think whatever I did with that shelter, I think it probably would have failed at some point, at some way or another, and then it would have been dark and it was even more difficult. And it was an easy way to get down, it was a bridle way, so it wouldn't have been difficult, but you know, potentially you're putting yourself into more danger. So I do think if you're in really, really dangerous, and they were pretty dangerous, you know, gusts of wind like that, I think pack up and go and find somewhere else that's a little bit more sheltered.
Post your comments below. Let's have it. Until the next video.